One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. This is the best day of the week, and not just because the weekend is almost here. It's because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm vice president of the Heartland Institute. We're an organization that's been around for 40 years and has been known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth to counter the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath the video. These all convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program and get the show in front of even more people. And a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you'd like to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join friends of this program who contribute and help bring this show to the world every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. We also want to thank, before we get started, our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, well, what's up with that? The CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. I hope you will find and follow all of these organizations on your favorite social media and video outlets. We got a big show today, so let's get started by introducing our usual panel. We have with us Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change. What's up with that? We have Sterling Burnett, the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. We have Linnea Lukin, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. And we also have Andy Singer, Senior Digital Media Manager at Heartland, who's the man behind the curtain, making this show look so great. So welcome, guys. We're going to be having a heat wave, right?
That's the rumor.
Yeah. But by the way, today is the summer solstice, so it only gets hotter from here.
That is true. Yes. Heat wave, also known as summer. So we've decided to make that the main topic for today because, the mainstream media, the legacy media started to get a jump on the heat wave by scaring us a week early. So we're going to have you prepared for all of the nonsense you'll be seeing in the media coming up over the weekend in the next few days. But before we get to that, we have our favorite segment on this program. It's called the Crazy Climate News of the Week. Hit it, Andy. All right. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. It's going to get hotter than that this week. So they say, hotter than even on fire. All right. Our first item today is residential solar appears to be collapsing. This is from PV Magazine. Headline, U.S. residential solar on the brink of collapse. Now, PV Magazine, PV stands for photovoltaic solar, by the way. I did my career in journalism. I did a little work in the business-to-business trade publications. One of them was called Pool and Spa News. So while there's a lid for every pot, there's a publication for every business you can imagine, no matter how niche. Anyway, let me read a little bit from this story. A teetering U.S. residential solar industry may now be on the brink of collapse. Faced by macroeconomic challenges and shifting sands of state and federal policies, an industry once defined by double-digit growth in installations is experiencing steep declines. And the latest draft of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act makes things far worse. The latest draft of the bill is bad all around for clean energy, but is particularly damaging to residential solar, cutting federal tax credits far sooner than expected. Residential solar installations declined 31% in 2024. Over the last year, industry titans like SunPower, Sunnova, and Mosaic Solar have filed for bankruptcy. The industry historically has leaned on the value proposition of lowering customer electricity bills and providing predictable costs for the long term. However, that value has been increasingly difficult to provide. You don't say. The residential solar industry is no stranger to highs and lows, often referred to as the solar coaster by those who have weathered the storm of hot and cold policies that create markets and then take them away at a breakneck pace. But the latest draft of the federal reconciliation bill may represent a crash. Looking ahead, if the bill passes as written, there will surely be a further retraction for U.S. residential solar. The industry will need to find new ways to lower costs to thrive in a harsher regulatory environment. Now, Linnea Lukin, the Heartland Institute is a free market think tank.
Yep.
Has solar power from the utility side or the consumer side ever existed in a free market?
No, absolutely not. It's been completely manufactured the entire time. Now, I'll say I've seen a lot of good off-grid uses of solar. People make a lot of good use out of it. Tesla has nice home battery systems. Whether or not you're concerned about battery fires, I don't know if Tesla's wall packs are prone to fires or not, but there are good uses for the technology. Grid scale and net metering are not it. They just aren't. It's the worst thing about this. There's a lot of things about this bill that I'm not ecstatic about, but one of the things that I don't love about this bill is that it only looks at the residential solar subsidies, right? I would really have rather it been the opposite. You know, if you were going to pick one and get rid of the other, I would much rather it lessen on the corporate or the utility scale side rather than the, home, even if there's net metering involved scale. It just seems backwards, like they're taking nibbles out of it rather than the big bite.
Yeah. Sterling, you wanted to weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, I've been working on the renewable energy almost as long as Linnea's been alive. It's sad to admit. And when they first started heavily subsidizing and mandating through renewable power mandates the use of wind and solar, they said, well, we're only doing it till we get it started, until it's competitive. And then the last few years, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they started, we're competitive. We're cheaper than coal. We're cheaper than natural gas. And the proof is in the pudding. Your electric rates go up and the subsidies continue. And they talk about this roller coaster ride, right? Sunnova just declared bankruptcy. Why? They canceled $2.9 billion in loan guarantees, the Trump administration did. They'd already taken $397 million in loans. The point is, there's no coal company taking $2.9 billion loan guarantees. Not an oil company in existence in the U.S. taking those loan guarantees for billions of dollars. They compete without government support. If they're so good at this stage, they're not orphaned, they're not new. And the proof, like I said, the proof's in the pudding. Every time the subsidies, the production tax credit runs out, the tax credits for property run out, the loan guarantees run out, factories shut the next day.
Yeah.
They know they stop planning for new construction the next day. If they were competitive, if they made any sense whatsoever, they wouldn't need this support, and they wouldn't shut down the very next day after the support disappears. They say they're competitive. They're not. And the proof is they're closing every time the government money goes away.
Yep.
They don't fit a market need.
Yep. Anthony, you want to pop in here too?
Yeah, being previously from California and previously putting solar on my own home, I want to point out that California had been leading the nation in terms of solar implementation on homes. But now that's changed dramatically. Why? Well, because in my opinion, the world's worst company, Pacific Gas and Electric, known for its greediness, stupidity, and I don't give a damn attitude related to starting fires, has moved away from what was called the net metering process. where the net metering would pay you back for the electricity that you generated and sent to the grid. Now what they've done is shifted, thanks to the PUC in California, shifted towards a net billing tariff. Yes, that nasty word tariff is being used in California against its own customers that have solar on their homes. And so basically they are getting pushed out of being able to earn or get offsets on their electricity bill. It is just absolute madness.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to follow up on what Sterling was saying, we could do it, we maybe will do an entire show on the collapse of the green industry that is almost entirely propped up by our tax dollars and special breaks that other businesses don't get. I mean, the same thing applies to the electric vehicle industry, as it were. I mean, Ford announces a huge plan to build a plant somewhere in Tennessee or Georgia or something, and we're just going to bring $3 billion investment, and then suddenly they delay and then cancel, right? these businesses depend on us to stay alive, and when we say no more, they go away.
They're complete creatures of government.
Yep.
One of the biggest things, is, of course, is the state mandates for renewable energy. If those had never happened, if the legislature had not started interfering with the engineering of the electric grid, we wouldn't have the collapses that we have now due to renewable energy, and we wouldn't have the renewable energy. No one would have been building windmills if they weren't saying you have to have them. And by the way, we give you cost plus 10% or 15% for every megawatt you build.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully, you can only do so much in 4 years, but hopefully by 2028, we will be farther down the road of sense when it comes to energy instead of nonsense. All right, let's get on to topic number 2 here. Carbon isotope fingerprint smudged. This comes from What's Up With That? The headline is, "The carbon isotope fingerprint just got smudged, and I owe some of you an apology." Interesting. Anthony, I'm going to set this up briefly for the audience and then let you run with it. This was written by Charles Rotter on your site. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
This is really a very
well. Hold on, Anthony. Let me read some from it so that they can get some background here. So it starts here from Charles Rotter. In light of the recent Nature study I discussed the other day, it's time to revisit a position I've long held, and it turns out one that now requires correction. Specifically, the long-standing assumption that carbon isotope ratios provide unambiguous proof that the rise in atmospheric CO2 is almost entirely anthropogenic. For years, I've maintained that anyone challenging the anthropogenic origin of CO2 increase had to address the isotope fingerprint argument before their work could be taken seriously. Submissions that did not engage in that evidence were declined, often with little further discussion. That confidence I now recognize was misplaced. And I'll just skip a little bit ahead here and then throw it right to you, Anthony. Charles Rotter writes, "The confidence behind isotopic attribution rested on the idea that only fossil fuels could be responsible for the observed depletion in, I guess that's omega C and delta 14C. This paper shatters that by showing that the Earth has its own large, continuous natural source of isotopically similar carbon." Now, Anthony, I know that in the climate realism communities in which we travel, there's been a little bit of discussion, perhaps in disagreement about all of this. So why don't you break this down for us?
Well, it boils down to the fact that carbon-14, which has been used for radioisotope dating of things, living things, pieces of wood, some fossils, that kind of thing, over the past, has basically been built on the premise that carbon-14, which is generated naturally on the Earth as part of the interaction of carbon molecules with the sun and so forth, carbon-14, slightly radioactive, gradually declines due to a very, very long half-life. And so eventually it gets down to zero, and past a certain point in the past, you can't do any analysis of carbon-14 because all of the isotopic carbon-14 is gone. So at that point, basically, the climate alarmist community has been saying, well, coal, being millions of years old, has no carbon-14 left in it. And oil, the same way. So, all this carbon-13, the old carbon that we see in the atmosphere, must be anthropogenic, must be being pushed out by man. Well, this paper just really throws a major monkey wrench into that argument. And that's going to affect things like the endangerment finding by the EPA, the power plants rule, all this stuff. Because now what's been discovered is that the Earth itself is spewing old carbon dioxide into the air through river systems and other mechanisms, rock weathering, stuff like that, stuff they have not accounted for in the past because, the science was settled, right? So it's not really settled at all. It's still in flux. In fact, I could say right now it's fluxed up.
Anthony, you keep forgetting to remind us when you have a nice joke coming so we can hit the rim shot. So snuck one past the goalie once.
Sorry,
again.
I only thought of that in the last second.
Yeah, very good. Well, yeah, I mean, to your point, that's what's fun and interesting about science is that it continually evolves and we learn more and more as we go along. The idea that science is settled is nonsense, and you see it in climate science, whether or not the mainstream media wants to tell you about it or not.
Yeah, it's just, the science was never settled. It'll never be settled. We're always learning new things about the Earth, about the environment, about space, about our galaxy, whatever. Anyone who says the science is settled is living in a myopic world.
Yeah. How dare you?
Very good. Yeah, that's right. Very good, producer Andy. All right, let's get on to our next item here. This is, I've titled it, "The Philly EV Buses Delete Themselves." We couldn't fit it on the screen, so it was shortened a little bit, but I like that framing. This is from a publication called Metro Philadelphia. "Massive SEPTA fire caused by electric batteries." I'll read a little bit here. SEPTA is expediting a plan to get rid of a troubled fleet of all-electric buses after a massive fire damaged dozens of vehicles Thursday morning on a lot within the authority's Nicetown maintenance facility. Investigators told SEPTA on Friday that the blaze was an electric fire caused by a lithium-ion battery, the engine storage devices used in buses manufactured by Proterra. Eventually, the incident grew into a 3-alarm incident, prompting the response of 150 fire personnel. Now, the story goes on to explain how SEPTA, Philadelphia's public transit system, paid $24 million for this fleet of electric buses in 2019. But within months of releasing them onto the world, they had to pull them from service because of flaws in manufacturing, cracks apparently somewhere in the vehicles. And they only kept these electric vehicles around, these white elephants, stored off to the side in a lot because of the lawsuit that they had filed against the manufacturer. So I guess their lawsuit probably has a pretty good chance to succeed now, since these things just went up and self-combusted. So anyway, I'll finish up with this. The head of Philly SEPTA is quoted like this, quote, "We have to get them off our property, away from the potential where we could have an incident like this that could have been far worse. We don't want to lose an entire facility. And more importantly, we don't want to hurt anyone. We've all agreed that we don't want them anymore. We just want to be done with them," he added. Now, Sterling, doesn't the head of SEPTA really speak for us all?
If I didn't feel a little bit of crocodile tears for the guy, because had they done any research prior, had they looked at what happened in, I believe it was Connecticut with their electric buses, or any modicum of research at all, had there not been green virtue signaling when they bought the buses in the first place, I feel pretty bad for him. It's likely that their lawsuit may gain some strength from this. But at the same time, if I was the electric bus manufacturer, I'd almost go in there and say, you knew about the danger. Everyone knows about the danger. It's not a mystery. Ships are burning at sea because of electric vehicles. They're sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Used car lots exploding. Repair places going up in flames. Public transit and school buses burning. If you are still investing in this technology that should have been pulled from the market by the Consumer Product Safety Administration, would have been at internal combustion cars acted like this.
Oh, gosh.
They would have been closed down tomorrow. We don't have the Corvair anymore. One guy complained in a book, and it's gone. These guys it's not just electric buses, it's electric scooters, it's electric cars. How many electric scooters have to kill people? How many people have to die before they pull these things off the market? Instead of saying, oh, well, they didn't charge it right. Oh, The one thing they all have in common is the lithium-ion batteries. That's the one thing they have in common. Not the not how they're charged, not the wiring, nothing else. The lithium-ion batteries, and that is endemic to them. That's the problem. There's a reason why you're not allowed to carry them in your luggage in the sky. The airlines figured this out. How can nobody else figure this out?
Back in the day, hot rodders used to paint flames on the side of their vehicles, to look really cool. I think all of the lithium buses should have flames on the side now.
Yeah. Now they don't have to. They don't need to paint them. They're on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a little bit funny, and this was inevitable. And, I always go to the Archbishop of Ranterbury first when it comes to electric vehicles, because I know how much you love them, Sterling. But, this idea that, we were going to have all of our school buses electrified. You remember Kamala Harris out there? So, who doesn't love our yellow school bus, and let's make them all electric, putting aside the impracticality of having, an entire electric school bus fleet in, say, Duluth, Minnesota. I guess you're going to be doing school remote a lot in January and February in Duluth if they were to actually do something like that. But it's the idea that these things can and do self-combust. Yeah. It's absurd that but all this tax money from the public has been wasted buying these things.
Yeah. Here's a good idea. I'm going to pitch it to school boards. I'm going to go speak at school boards. Let's strap our kids to a bomb and send them to school. Doesn't that sound like a good idea? There's no detonator. We're not going to. It could go off randomly. But that sounds like a good idea to me. And yet every one of these school systems that purchase electric buses, that's what they're doing.
Yep. All right. Linnea, did you have something you wanted to contribute before we move on?
Oh, I was just going to share the reason I was laughing to myself a second ago before people were saying things that were funny was I just had the thought just flashed across my brain of what would have happened in that one Magic School Bus episode where they went inside the human body if it was an electric Magic School Bus. And it would be a terrible situation. Most people here probably don't know what I'm talking about. But
Magic Electric School Bus.
To my my friends who grew up going to school watching Magic School Bus episodes when they brought the computer cart or the TV cart out in class. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, so the rest of us on this show, Linnea, are so old that we had to walk to school uphill both ways. We didn't get a school bus, but that's how that goes.
Just before we leave, I want to point out one thing. You got this great video streaming right there. Could you go back to it for a second? The school bus is burning. I want you to look at all that black soot going into the atmosphere. Mm. The carbon dioxide that's accompanying that going into the atmosphere. I bet that's more carbon dioxide from this one fire than all of their fleet of school buses produced in a year when they were internal combustion engines. The toxins that are spewing along with that smoke, because lithium-ion batteries, they aren't your normal batteries, folks. You think you like arsenic in the air? You like all sorts of other chemicals in the air? That's all going up. You're breathing that right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we I mean, that black smoke is bad, but hopefully, our tax dollars aren't going to be buying these pollution creators, real pollution creators, not CO2, but real pollution in the air creators going forward. So, all right, let's move on to our fourth crazy climate news of the week item. This one is, forgive us, a little self-indulgent. Heartland, UK, Europe is causing trouble. This is from our friends at DeSmog, who just can't seem to quit us. Headline, Nigel Farage to headline Tufton Street climate denial event. So this is the second time, I think, this month we've cited DeSmog in a crazy climate news of the week item. So one more time, and they get to be an official sponsor, I guess. I'll prepare an invoice. But it says here, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage is set to speak at an event today organized by a pro-Trump think tank and held in the home of the UK's main climate science denial group, DeSmog Can Reveal. Yeah, reveal. This was publicly announced, but you do you. Fake drama. Farage, whose party campaigns to scrap the UK's goal of achieving net zero emissions, is the star speaker at the event, described as, quote, a groundbreaking conversation about climate policy. The event has been convened by the UK EU branch of the Heartland Institute, a US group that has been at the forefront of denying the scientific evidence for man-made climate change, and, like Farage, claims that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Guilty as charged. Now, after noting in this story that Heartland received funding from ExxonMobil from 1998 to 2007, which was nearly 20 years ago, when this reporter was probably still pooping in his diapers, DeSmog notes this actual true fact. Quote, Heartland has close ties to Donald Trump's administration, having advised several government agencies during the president's first term. In February, the group's UK EU chief, Lois Perry, who is speaking alongside Farage today, claimed that Heartland has, quote, very strong affiliations with, quote, certain big individuals in Trump's team. Now, Sterling, I think, as we noted last week or the week before when DeSmog came up, they just can't quit us. And so you can react to this story any way you want. But, one, this kind of story, I think, proves what we say on the top of this show, every show, that there's no one more prominent on the topic of climate realism than the Heartland Institute. And two, that nothing seems to bring fear into the hearts of climate alarmist scammers like us bringing the truth to the climate to so many people.
Well, I guess my only thoughts are, I read something like this and suddenly my chest puffs up a little bit. I feel like it's a badge of honor to be blasted by these guys. When stupid people attack you for telling the truth, you should feel pretty good about yourself. And, look, Heartland UK is a fairly recent creation. And that tells you what they were, sort of the vacuum, the void that existed in the UK before we got there. That we are in 6 months the driver of climate skepticism, the prominent thing that they have to keep talking about. That they don't have anyone else to go to and say, oh, well, these guys have been working on this for years and been skeptical. No, in 6 months, we have filled the void. And there's some evidence, modicum of evidence that we're having it's not just talking points. It's not just that we're getting some notoriety in the press. We're having an effect. They're having conversations in places of power, in Parliament, and because of our work in the UK, in Europe, and our work in Europe. So, look, this is a point of pride. I'm not in the UK. I'm not driving their media or marketing, but to the extent that Heartland is helped form this institute, provides the information for this institute as far as the science and the policy, it's something I can be proud of, and I think we should all be pretty proud of.
Yeah, it does feel good to not have to pay rent to get this kind of advertising,
Yeah. Anthony, you always joke that, you're still waiting for those checks from big oil to come in as they continually disappoint us by not funding us.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people still believe that people like myself that have an honest opinion that they come to on their own, looking at data, looking at trends, looking at all that stuff, that people like myself that come to those opinions only came to that because we're being forced to, because we're being paid by big oil to have that opinion. It's absolutely absurd. I don't know of any climate skeptic anywhere in the world, and literally I know thousands of them through my blog and through my work at Heartland and so forth, has ever accepted a dime from big oil. And big oil has never funded any kind of a climate denial movement per se. The people that try to attack Heartland and say, well, back in 2005, ExxonMobil gave Heartland some money. Well, gosh, that was 20 years ago. But hey, guess what? That money was for a healthcare study, not climate change. Heartland really didn't get big on climate change until around 2007. So point is that the whole thing is just a a fantasy, and they use it simply to smear people because they've got nothing else.
Yep.
I mean, Anthony, do you think that this is not from everyone, because there's a bunch of random people, trolls or random true believers and stuff on Twitter or X rather, or wherever else, or in the comments on What's Up With That, who, genuinely they read something on desmog and they just believe it. So they're not projecting. But do you think that some of this is projection? Like some of these guys are getting paid to have these like kind of alarmist perspectives, and so they just assume that everybody else is compromised in that way?
Oh, I'm sure a lot of it is projection. I mean, you look at the kind of money that's been thrown at environmentalism and the climate scare. I mean, there's millions, if not billions of dollars had been put into the climate scare for research and NGOs and whatnot. Remember, we had episodes about throwing the gold bars off the Titanic, as Biden was leaving, so that we could keep these climate NGOs running. And so the amount of money that's gone into climate alarmism promotion compared to the amount of money that's gone into climate skepticism, which we usually have to earn on our own, we're fighting for scraps. There's a disparity of like maybe 10,000 to 1, maybe even higher. And so, yeah, a lot of this is projection, and it's not surprising.
Yeah, we know for a fact. We know for a fact that Russia funded anti-fracking protests through green groups in the United States. That Russia wanted to promote its gas. They didn't want us doing fracking and export terminals, so they funded fear of fracking through green groups, and they were more than happy to take Russia's money. We know for a fact that environmental foundations, groups that are known that publicly state, we fear climate change, we must do something, are giving millions of dollars every year to the Associated Press to cover climate. Do you think the Associated Press is going to say, oh, well, we've taken your money and we found out there's no big bad climate crisis going on? No. So this is not a mystery. It is projection. It's misdirection. It's the same thing that the Wizard and the Wizard of Oz. Ignore the man behind the curtain. Ignore who's funding this. When Soros funds them, nobody cares except for the right.
Right. Well, don't ignore. We can't ignore our man behind the curtain, Andy Singer. But the other men behind the other curtains, we can ignore them. You've neglected to point out, Sterling, that the Associated Press, I believe it's the Associated Press or maybe other wire services, the Washington Post, their climate desks are funded by green groups. And where do they get their money? By the way, nobody seems to be very curious. But we have legacy mainstream media in this country that are paid to write only alarmist coverage.
That's right.
They're not paid to cover climate fairly. They're paid to propagandize. That's a pretty big problem, but DeSmog doesn't care about that. America should. I don't know. All right. We'll move on, but as Linnea said, it is great to live rent-free in the heads of these people, and we're very proud of it, and I'm very happy that our audience is here with us to share that little bit of good news. All right, let's get on to our main topic for today, which is, we're going to do a heat wave pre-bunking fact check for you. I noticed this story this week in the Washington Post that was out there a little early. And it says, maps show the city's about to experience extreme humidity and heat. Over the next 2 weeks, extreme levels of humidity are forecast to hit around 40 states, with the first wave of very muggy weather building in central and eastern states through Thursday. Across the country, around 170 million people will also experience temperatures above 90 degrees. My stars! 90-degree temperatures in June. Can you believe it? Anyway, we all want you to know that there is a part here, because we're waiting for it, where the Washington Post blames all of this heat wave stuff on us, on human activity supposedly causing climate change. And so they do it. And I found that part in the story. Quote, but how is summer humidity changing? Over the past 40 years, September has been the summer month with the largest trend toward higher humidity across much of the United States. This is probably linked to the warm season becoming longer and more intense because of climate change, ocean warming, and other patterns of climatic variability. Oh my gosh, climatic variability. Can you believe that too? Before we'll set this up and get into some of these things, there's a second story here that Sterling Burnett shared with me this morning. It's from Climate Change Dispatch. It says here, this is actually good news. Meteorologists roasted for hyping summer heat waves as forecasts sizzle out. Germany's alarmist weathermen are losing credibility as viewers and the public call out the hype. I'll read a bit here. Meteorologists are discovering that if they want to get attention from the media and more clicks and likes in the short term, then all they have to do is announce fictional heat waves that weather models routinely hallucinate 10 to 14 days out, e.g. temperatures could soar to 40 degrees Celsius. German online magazine Weltwoche reports on this phenomenon with a recent article titled, "After the heat wave comes the red hot wave." The climate alarmists are making themselves look absurd and losing all credibility. And let me just share a few images here, Andy, from the slideshow before we throw it to the panel here. This is a post on Twitter from Anthony's favorite, the Capital Weather Gang at the Washington Post, where all eyes are on DC for the first major heat wave of 2025. It's going to be intense. Once this stormy stretch ends on Thursday, it could feel like 110 degrees. It could last 5 to 7 days. Look at all that red and orange and yellow. It's so scary. And then here's another image from our friend of the show, Chris Martz, recent meteorology degree earner. He points out that most of the June high temperatures were set in the 1930s, especially in the myopic Northeast and Midwest media bubbles. And that was many, many parts per million of CO2 ago in the background. So, Anthony, as a practicing meteorologist, do you think it's encouraging that fewer and fewer people seem to be falling for this kind of hype and the scare tactics from outfits like, Capital Weather Gang and other legacy media outlets?
Yeah, I think so, because you can only cry wolf so many times before people start ignoring you. And literally, this is as predictable as the sun rises every day. Every time we get into summer, it's just as predictable that we're going to have a heat wave. It happens. It's part of summer. And so what happens is, of course, the climate alarmist media tries to turn that into, it's climate change, it's climate change. No, it's weather. It's summer. Get over yourselves. I used to say, when we would have heat waves in California, when I was on the air there as a television meteorologist, I would say to people, to kind of lighten the mood, head for the mountains, head for the coast, because if you stay in the valley, you're going to roast. And people would take that literally and head off for getting away from the heat. I've experienced 115 to 117 degree temperatures in Northern California in the Sacramento Valley. And yes, it's tough, but no, it's not catastrophic, and people survived. And in fact, those kinds of temperatures happened in the 1930s, and there was no air conditioning, right? And lots of people died during the 1936 heat wave across the United States. We have far less people dying today due to heat waves and heat stress than we did back then, because we've adapted and we have better technology.
Right. And I'm tired of these Midwesterners, myself, when I, before I lived in the South included, complaining about humidity across the Midwest. When, as some of our viewers who are currently living in South Louisiana and Florida and whatnot know, if you can walk outside at 2 a.m. and you are instantly wet, that you are living somewhere that is way more humid than anything the Midwest almost ever sees. It's pretty outstanding, actually. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, I got 3 things on this. It's variously attributed to different people. I've heard Abraham Lincoln say it. I've heard other people say it. But Anthony says people can't get fooled anymore. They're less prone to getting fooled. Look, the old saying is you can fool some of the people all the time. You can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And that's what's happening here, concerning the heat wave, I'm going to make a prediction. I don't often predict things, but I'm going to make a prediction. I predict it's going to be hot for the next 3 months. That places across the country will set new records for heat. Now, of course, where I live in Texas, we're not setting any records right now. We had a cool May. We're having so far cooler than average June. Some people aren't complaining about that. I'm not happy. My pool's not as warm as it could be. But the point is, I believe just 2 weeks ago, Jim and them were complaining about 40-degree weather.
Yeah.
Now they're talking about a heat dome setting in. Oh, you mean it might get to where it's supposed to be in late June in summer? Concerning humidity, has it been getting more humid in September? I don't know. But my suspicion is that we weren't measuring that very good more than 40 years ago. Certainly weren't using it for climate prediction purposes, but for local weather purposes. And it wasn't fit for purpose then for climate prediction purposes. So, I view that with some skepticism, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah. Well, we have one of the products of the Heartland Institute is our wonderful website and book called Climate at a Glance, which we're actually in the process of updating right now. And we, as it happens, of course, we have a section there on heat waves in the Climate at a Glance website and book. That's climateataglance.com. Anthony, I think maybe you can walk us through this a little bit. This
Sure.
idea that heat waves are becoming more intense and more frequent over the last, 20, 30 years compared to earlier in the 20th century is just false.
It is. And if we can look at the graph, scroll down a little bit. And this is a graph from the EPA, not that one, the next one. Keep going. There it is, right there. That graph is from the EPA, and they have their own climate alarmism department, or at least used to before their funding got whacked. But the point is that we had a natural event in the United States in the 1930s. And it wasn't just 1 year, it was 1934 and 1936. We had tremendous amounts of heat waves throughout the Midwest and other parts of the United States. And it has not been repeated since, even though we've had increasing carbon dioxide throughout that time. And the carbon dioxide levels at that time were in the 300-something range. And yet, here we are today in the 420 to 430 range. We're having heat waves, but they're not nearly as intense. And so the attempt to link increased carbon dioxide to heat waves just simply falls flat on the face of the data itself. And I think there's another graph, if you scroll down a little further, that I can highlight. There it is. This is from Chris Marks. This is the number of observed very hot days per year, 1895 to 2013. Again, you can see the big spike in the 1930s. But look at the bottom, at the really heavy duty temperatures, the temperatures that are greater than 100 degrees or greater than 105. That's pretty much been flat. It goes up and down as is normal with the weather variation, but there's been no net increase in extremely hot days in the United States. And so the premise of blaming heat waves on climate change is absolute bunk.
Yes,
Well,
indeed.
Or as we like to call it here, it's
Pretty
pre-bunked.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
but then to be fair, we're some of those silly people that care about data and numbers, and they care about feelings. They feel hot, and they feel that because they're hot, it must be a disaster. It must be climate change, and we should respect that. We shouldn't confuse the issue with actual data, with numbers, with facts. They just get in the way of a really good story.
Yeah, that's true. We routinely on Climate Realism debunk stories on a daily basis. And we just simply go in and look at the data. And then we look at what this, as Jim said earlier, this reporter who was probably pooping in their diapers 20 years ago wrote this story about climate doom with no basis in fact. And we can just slice and dice these things easily by simply looking at the data that exists. And yet, the media doesn't want to look at the data because it destroys their narrative. It destroys their ability to write doomy headlines. It destroys their ability to get extra clicks, which means more advertising. And so that's why we continue to see this stuff, even though the facts don't support it.
Yep. All right. Well, I think it's about ready for Q&A. Before we go there, Anthony, I just wanted to say your microphone, you might be having some audio issues on your microphone that it's not close to you. Oh my God.
There we go.
I
have a habit of, well, you mute your microphone. I forget to move it over.
All right.
Got it
settled. All right. Great. So yeah, I know we have some questions and comments to address from our wonderful audience here in the chat on YouTube and Rumble. So Linnea, take it away.
All right. Okay. Hello, audience. We are beginning Q&A here now. Okay, so we have some really good questions here, some of which I know that we probably won't know the answer to off the top of our heads, but maybe Anthony knows the answer to this. I don't know. Ian McMillan asks, how much CO2 do volcanoes emit in total, say, per annum, compared to anthropogenic emissions?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I will say there's been a couple of recent studies that found that there's way more undersea volcanoes than was previously thought. And they don't know what the contribution of the CO2 is from those. Some of the eruptions happen under the sea, and carbon dioxide is emitted in that, and then it gets dissolved into the seawater if it doesn't make it to the surface. And so there's that. There's also been a recent study that we published on WhatsApp with that talks about a new way that they started measuring carbon dioxide emissions from volcanoes. Mm-hmm. And I believe this came out of the UK, and they discovered, hey, we've made a huge mistake in the way that we're measuring the amount of CO2 emissions out of volcanoes, because we're not taking into account all these dozens to hundreds of fumaroles that are all around the side of the mountain, that are venting. And so when they looked at the net total coming out of all of this compared to just the main vent, there was a huge order of magnitude or more difference. And so, again, settled science, we don't know right now how much is coming out of volcanoes versus humans, because they don't have a good handle on it.
I should say I covered that particular paper and the undersea paper in Climate Change Weekly 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, and what they found with the fumaroles, the small vents around volcanoes, they're measuring the emissions at the main vent, what we think of as where the lava flows from, the soot shoots into the sky, but there are little ones all around, and they said we haven't been counting the emissions from that. When you do that, I think at the time, I haven't reread my Climate Change Weekly for this show. I didn't know this was going to come up, but I think it was like 3 times more CO2 came from that than they had estimated previously. And even then, it's sort of estimates because they don't have monitors on all active volcanoes.
Right.
They extrapolate from the volcanoes they do monitor well to the world.
Well, I think we gave a pretty good answer to that question. All right. Chris Nisbet asks, does the IPCC actually claim that carbon dioxide is pollution, as implied by that DeSmog article?
Nope. They don't mention it as pollution anywhere. They talk about the total emissions, they talk about the total amount in the atmosphere, and so forth and so on, but nowhere do they call it pollution. That's only at the EPA where they do that.
All right. Pat Harmit says, it's amazing that folks that think you get big oil money make a fake CR site page showing a big list or a list of big oil contributions. I haven't seen that, Pat. I'd love to see that if you'd send it our way. Surely with that much money, Linnea could have bigger hair. Listen, it's I plead, it's summertime and it's really quite humid, even in a little bit inside of my own house, although I do have air conditioning on. Thank you, fossil fuels. And I plead that there's nothing I can do about my hair in the summer. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better. All right. Walter.
You could get one of those Dolly Parton wigs.
I could do that.
Everything comes back. I mean, is big 80s hair coming back? Am I missing a fashion trend?
Oh, they're doing perms now.
Oh my God.
The Gen Z kids are doing perms right now. So, alrighty. Walter asks, climate alarmists say that higher levels of carbon dioxide cause ocean acidification, which leads to extinction of marine life. What does the data show? Sterling.
Climate alarmists say that higher. What the data shows is that CO2 can enter the levels of the ocean, and acidification is not occurring. Acidification, it makes it sound like it's making it acid. No, the ocean is it's not basic. What's the term? Having a senior moment, Anthony. What's the term for the level of the ocean right now? Alkaline. It's alkaline. And as CO2 gets in there, has it become less alkaline? Well, they don't know because they don't have a good measurement of where it is. It ranges from 8.3 to 8.1 or so. The base, I believe, is what? Anthony? Where does it go? Where does it go? Where does it go from alkaline to acid?
Yeah, it went from it went towards acidic 0.1 pH, 0.1 pH. And I will point out that that's not even a measurement. That comes from a model.
Yeah.
If you go to climate-at-a-glance.com and look up ocean acidification, I actually show the paper where they make this claim, that this acidification has happened over the last 100+ years, but it's based on a model. We didn't have any pH measurements in 1850. Ships didn't do that. Some of them measured temperature and so forth, but there's been no long-term pH measurements where you can actually track this stuff. And so again, it's an assumption based on a model.
And it's still a long way from being acid.
Right. And there have been no extinctions of sea life, zero, none, nada, due to a slight shift in pH, even if it exists.
And I want to point out that locally there's a slight shift in pH towards acidic every single time it rains and you get wash off of shore. And locally, when you have a big downpour over a reef or something, that top couple of centimeters of water is going to be acidified or de-alkaline or slightly less alkaline for a period of time until it mixes in. So if it was catastrophic, then I think we would see that in all shallow reef systems all the time.
But what we also know is that historically the evidence suggests that oceans have been more acidic than they are now, and they've been less acidic than they are now. Someone pointed out, thank you for answering my question. I was just having a senior moment. Neutral is 7. So if it's 8.1, it's well above neutral right now. And that's not going below neutral. So 0.1 of a degree, 0.1 of a change is not much. I'm not sure it can be measured accurately.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more complicated than pretty much anyone is willing to take it on.
And it wouldn't be uniform across all the oceans of all the Earth either, would it? I wouldn't think.
No. These are averages. Again, it's not, it's different everywhere in the world all the time. So yeah, different at different depths, different at, yeah. Okay, let's go. LT Oracle of Truth asks, what was the sun doing in the 1930s? Any unusual activity?
It was shining, I'm sure of it.
There's a couple of questions about, why is there such a big spike in the 1930s in our data?
It was a series of high-pressure ridges, Rex blocks, that kind of thing. It was just a weather pattern that tended to set in during that time. And that's really all anyone's ever found. There was no particular solar activity that caused this.
So just bad luck, bad timing stuff.
Yeah, and we could see this happen again. We could see 2 or 3 years of summer weather patterns, with huge high pressure domes that refuse to move, Rex blocks, that kind of stuff, that could be repeated. And of course, the first time it happens and the second and third time, it's going to be climate change, not just natural weather patterns.
Well, I mean, could you imagine if that happened right now? If we had 4 straight years of record high temperatures that matched the 1930s, we'd probably, all 4 of us would probably be in jail because of that. So hope it doesn't happen. But
no, we're not going to be in jail. We've got all that big oil money to buy us the best lawyers.
All right, so we have a question from Facebook, which I don't think I can bring up on screen because Facebook's system just doesn't like StreamYard very much. From Ivan, who asks, I would like to have your input regarding the relation of the climate change narrative with the concept of the Overton window. And so I'll say, oh, thank you. Very good, Andy. So for people who don't know, I'll just give a quick kind of explanation what he means by the Overton window. The Overton window is kind of the like acceptable range of political discussion or like public discussion on any issue. And so, yeah, I think what you're getting at here is that the Overton window, meaning the range of what people talk about publicly on like major television networks or on social media or whatever it happens to be, that's not like a taboo, has definitely shifted, I think, on the climate issue. It tends to fluctuate from year to year, I think. But the last 2 years, I would say, people are coming out being much more strongly skeptical of the alarmist position. And the alarmists are actually starting to get a little bit more extreme in some cases about their claims, which just pushes people more to the skeptical side, I think. I think it's a matter of the alarmists are kind of panicking that they're losing a grip, and so they're gripping way too tight. And so they're starting to lose people a lot faster.
Yeah, we have two great examples on this show every week of someone getting outside the Overton window, and that's Greta. Greta, when she went before the UN with her "How dare you" famous moment and the mass extinction thing, that was way outside of the Overton window, and people looked at that and go, "Why are you even paying attention to this kid? She's just ranting." I mean, she makes the Archbishop of Ranterbury look like an amateur. So, that's what's happened. There's been too much ranting, and some people are going, you know what? This is just crap. Their bullshit detectors are going off.
How dare you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. We've joked. We had Steve Malloy from junkscience.com and the E&E Legal Institute and a board member of Heartland Institute on the show a few episodes back. And we joked that, we may have to rename this show because our side is winning this right now. We're winning it in policy in the Trump administration. I think public polling shows that despite literally decades of indoctrination, that at best the public is split on, blaming humans for climate change and that something needs to be done. And we basically have to embrace communism to save the planet. That message is not resonating, despite every advantage that message has had in the public sphere, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so the Overton window is closer to us now than it was, say, 10 years ago when Greta first burst on the scene. And, every media story, I mean, we cover this stuff here. And when there's still dominant media stories, or I should say stories in the dominant, I guess maybe less dominant these days, but in the legacy media, always from an alarmist perspective, you'll know that the window has moved and stuck in place in realism for a while when you see NBC News start to report skeptically on some alarmist new study. There's another alarmist study in the peer-reviewed literature almost literally every day, and they're highlighted by the legacy media. The more scientifically sound stuff that actually sneaks through and gets into the peer-reviewed media, that is not blaming human activity for every calamity on Earth. Those things don't get any mainstream media coverage. They get coverage here, but not in the mainstream media. So we'll know that the window has moved and maybe will stick in a realistic place when we start seeing that a little bit more often in the broader culture.
Yeah, this is a good.
See the Overton doorway where we can just walk out of this thing, right?
Yeah, I just want to say DJ Bo should be congratulated for fitting in a 38 special lyrics when you talk about holding on loosely there.
And I think this is a fair follow-up question from Ed Reed, who says, but are we winning the hearts of Congress? And I think that yes and no. It depends. It really does depend.
Except for the ones that are being bought off by Big Green Energy. Not a single person in Congress voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. They said it was all a scam. All the subsidies were a scam. But once the Democrats started putting big green energy in their districts, suddenly some of them have found the light. The angels sung, and they say, "Oh, green subsidies are good because they don't only care about creating jobs. They don't care about ruining the nation. They don't care about how many people die. They care about the fact that, oh, well, we've got factories here. The subsidies are flowing to my district, and that's all I care about."
Yeah, it's very short-term thinking. Above Us Only Sky said, if reports of increased humidity are true, doesn't that imply that water vapor is more of a factor on weather conditions than carbon dioxide? And my initial response would be, well, there might be some alarmists out there that are claiming that carbon dioxide directly influences like small scale weather events, but I think pretty much everyone knows that it's water vapor, like humidity obviously has an impact on the weather, and water and humidity is the weather. So, Anthony?
Yeah, I can't wait to see a meme picture of Al Gore outside with a CO2 fire extinguisher squirting it into the air to influence the weather. There's absolutely no connection between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and small-scale weather changes. And in fact, the IPCC admits this in their AR6 report. They have a whole section on attribution of severe weather and so forth related to climate change. And in most cases, it's just not there. You can go to WhatsApp with that and look on the right sidebar. And I have that chart there from the IPCC. You can see for yourself that's supposedly the best climate science in the world and can't even make this connection. So it's just not there.
What they do say in the climate models, right? One of the reasons the climate models do so poorly when compared to actual temperature measurements is they build in something called feedback mechanisms, these feedback loops. So they say CO2 goes up and it affects stuff on the ground, which causes more warming. And one of the things that they say is happening or should happen is that as CO2 goes up, it causes more evaporation and more humidity, more moisture in the air. And that's a feedback mechanism that adds to the heat. And yet they can't measure any of that. It's all assumptions built into models. And the complex models that build those feedback mechanisms in do more poorly when compared to actual temperature trends than simpler models that don't build any feedback mechanisms in, because we really don't know how those so-called mechanisms work or if they work at all.
All right. Okay, let's go and see. Oh yeah. So we wanted to say thank you very much to Ron over there on Facebook for contributing to the show. We really appreciate it. I know Facebook is kind of a unique platform these days. It's kind of trying to figure itself out. So we really appreciate you sticking with us over there. We have a question from Rico Man who says, has the temperature gradient of the oceans changed much over time? As I have read, sunlight only warms a millimeter or two of the sea surface.
Well, we don't have a lot of good data on that. The Argo floats that have been out there have been trying to answer that question. And yeah, there's some people that say there's a signal there. There's other people say, nah, there's no signal there at all. But yeah, the sun only warms the first couple of millimeters of the sea surface. And the deep depths, it takes a very, very, very long time for any heat to get down there. And I would point out that the idea of the atmosphere heating the oceans is absolutely ridiculous. It's not even founded in science. And you can prove this to yourself. Go get yourself a pot of water, just get your standard kitchen pot. And then measure the temperature. And go out there and get your kitchen hair dryer, right? Or not your kitchen hair dryer, your bathroom hair dryer, and blow hot air at the surface of that big pot of water. See how long it takes to heat up. And it'll give you an idea of, the lack of transfer of heat in the atmosphere to heat in the oceans. It takes a very, very, very long time. It's very slow, and it's minuscule in the process.
All righty. We also have a comment on Facebook that I think that we should probably bring up. There's a claim from someone called BT Anthony who says, and yet wind and solar are being deployed 5 times faster around the world than all other sources of generation combined. Comments, you guys? This is a murderer for our claim.
This is one of my trolls on Facebook. I got tired of him and got rid of him. So, I'm just going to go.
Well, I mean, if they're being deployed because your tax dollars are putting all those things out into the world. Without that, they wouldn't be distributed. They wouldn't be going up 5 times faster. They'd hardly be going up at all. And besides, a big solar farm, I hate using the word farm, but a solar facility and a wind facility, these things need to be constantly maintained and repaired. A nuclear plant really doesn't need that. So you have one nuclear plant and it's going to power a vast amount of residences and businesses in a very small footprint. So
look,
that's a meaningless statistic to me.
Industry will build whatever the government's going to subsidize. So to the extent that governments around the world are pushing big wind and solar and backing it with money or mandates, it's not surprising that they're building it. But I'd still be curious as to next year whether more coal or fossil fuels are brought online in India than wind and solar as far as pure megawatts and reliable megawatts, not nameplate capacity, but actual production. And I'd be curious the same thing about China. Now that it's true here in the U.S. because we don't allow any coal to be built. We haven't built new nuclear. We're talking about it. We keep talking about it. So it's certainly there's more being built here, but that's because that's what the government's pushing.
Right.
We have a bit of a follow-up comment from Nuts Bolts, who says, sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but with regards to the sea temperature gradient, he says, surely the temperature gradient is fixed by density and salinity. I think fixed is probably a strong word because the density or the salinity of seawater isn't constant either. So,
well, look, there's a large heat transfer. They were talking about heat transfer. There's large heat transfer, but it's driven by ocean currents, large scale, natural, cyclical currents that take warm water from one location and shift it to the other, where when it gets up around the Arctic or Antarctic, it cools down then again. But this happens, and that's why we have something called La Nina and El Nino cycles, not just in the Pacific, though that's the most notable one, but also to a lesser extent in the Atlantic.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we've got here. Anybody have any good comments? We have such a good audience here. You guys always have great questions and some very funny. We have like the funniest audience.
We do have fun on this program, not just us on the show, but the people that are participating in the chat, and we do appreciate you all being here. But I guess since it's no more questions, we can end the show.
Well, here's one that just popped up. DJ Bo over on Rumble, I believe, asked, I just saw a report that we may pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius tipping point within 3 years. Wasn't there a report last year that said we already passed it?
For a year and a half. For a year and a half, we already passed it. But now we're talking about, the problem is, if that was true, and we can debate that, but if that was true, then Paris is dead. So they had to push it out another 3 years.
Right. But here's the thing. We had a peak of temperature, and now it's coming down. So, we're going to get out of that 1.5 degree peak, But the thing is, lots of people were predicting literally utter doom once we get past this threshold. Yeah. Well, that threshold was completely arbitrary. It's not based in science. It was just a bunch of people that got together and say, what is a number that we can come up with that we can use as the target for political gain, to suppress, fossil fuels and so forth and so on. And 1.5 degrees centigrade was the number they came up with. Well, Mother Nature had other ideas, and boom, it went past that. And now they're like, oh, well, we really meant it 10 years from now or 50 years from now. Or no, really, it's 2.5 degrees centigrade. That's the real number. Yeah. Don't get me started.
There's a tipping point out there somewhere. And politicians will find it to generate alarm and subsidies.
And then there's also just the absurdity of arrogance, really, that I guess whatever the global temperature was in 1998 is the temperature it should remain forever. And if it goes up at all, it is our fault and calamity ensues. This whole idea that it's better if we live in a cooler world or if we have less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I mean, it's absolutely cultish. It doesn't make any sense. The 1.5 degrees Celsius was a number pulled out of the air in Paris. It has no scientific justification or meaning or anything. The whole point of this, as you pointed out, Anthony, is to keep calamity just a few years in the future. That way, we have to reorganize society to avoid that calamity. If, as you say, Sterling, that we may have already gotten the 1.5 degrees warmer, crossed that magic threshold, and if we did so, then the whole thing is moot. Then there's nothing we can do. So forget it. Let's just live our lives. So they're not going to let that happen. So they're going to keep pushing it out in the future, or they will be gaming the data. They'll do whatever they need to do in order to keep the global scam going. And we're here to cover it.
Yeah, Matt G says, stop blaming lazy people for everything. We didn't do anything. And then, and also Miles Schumacher says, when the sun goes red to the red giant stage, then we'll be talking about global warming. Yeah, in a couple of more billion years when that happens, I'll be really worried about it. But until then, I'm just not going to lose sleep over it. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have today. I'm going to pass it back to Jim here.
All right. Well, Andy, you can play that favorite exit music that you like so much, and we will thank everybody who watched the show today live. Be sure to bring friends next time, live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so you can join the chat, get your questions answered, and have some fun with our regular viewers. I want to thank Andy Singer, our producer in the background. I want to thank Linnea and Anthony and Sterling for being our regular panelists on this show. Always visit climate-realism.com, where you can get daily debunking of climate alarmist nonsense in the mainstream media. Go to climate-at-a-glance.com, where you can get the facts and the data that actually explain what's happening on our planet and not the garbage that you can see in much of the media. And also, Energy at a Glance discusses, all the energy systems that are competing against each other and which ones are more efficient and the best ones to pursue. Always visit junkscience.com, visit CFACT, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, and what's up with that, and also Heartland, UK, Europe. And if you go to heartland.org and click the subscribe button at the top, you too can get the Climate Change Weekly newsletter in your inbox every single week. Our own Sterling Burnett produces that for us. Thank you all for being here with us today, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.